Okay, so this is another bowl variation. This is referred to as a cube turned on a bias. This is a little piece of Oregon myrtle wood. If you're noticing, it only has 3 points where cubes have 4 or 8. And what turned on a bias means is that instead of turning it between centers this way, you turn it on centers between two opposing corners. So when you turn it, 3 of the corners will vanish and the other 3 corners end up being the top of your bowl. There are a bunch of variations you can do on these. There's one where I kind of left it square on top. You can curve them in, you can flare them out. I actually gave one to a gentleman in our Turners Club who's more artistic than I am and said, I think you could make a neat box out of this, and he ran off with Cindy Drozda's Elegant Finials video and came back with one of these with a lid on it, mounted on a pedestal, and with a neat little finial on the top of it, a beautiful little piece. And unfortunately he sold it before I could take a picture of it, but this is how we make these. So first step is to make a cube, and I'll show you how to do that on the bandsaw. Okay, first step, you want to rip something that is going to be square around the edges. I've already done that on the bandsaw with this one, and I'll leave it basically set where it is with the fence guide here. Next thing I need to do is square up the ends. Real simple trick for doing this, and you can eyeball it, and I learned this from Mr. Alan Batty, and it's a real forehead slapper. But I want to make the cut about here, lay it down, and that mark is absolutely square to that edge, so I lay it down this way and cut. And since this is already to width here, make another mark. I can cut that freehand. I'm going to go ahead and cut this one through. These don't have to be perfect, but you want them fairly close. I have enough room for another one. Now I've got 2 nice cubes. Okay, now in order to turn this between centers off the corners, I need to make a flat spot on the corners, 2 opposing corners. I just lay these out with my speed square like this. Wander around the 3 corners. This does not have to be perfect. If it's close, that works. You can saw it off. I thought the sawing was too difficult. I took a big chisel like this, pounded them off a few times, and then I thought, you know, this can be done on the table saw. It is a compound miter, but basically you set your miter gauge at 45 degrees for the angle, and this angle here for the compound miter figures at 35 point something degrees. And considering how accurate the miter gauges are on table saws, if you're between 35 and 36, that'll give you pretty close to perfect. So I have this corner marked off, so run through the table saw again, 35 to 36 degrees on that, 45 degrees this way. Nice flat surface, get the other corner. Take a little more. Nice flat surface for mounting the headstock with a spur drive and the tailstock on the other end, so I can turn it between centers and turn it down. So now I roughly mark the center here. I'll eyeball down the line, put a line that way, down that line, kind of make a crosshairs in the center. It does not have to be perfect, but it helps to be fairly close. I generally just don't like taking the time to stop and measure everything. So between, and I don't know that it really makes any difference which ends you use, but the first thing I want to do, I want to turn a tenon on one end. And I do like leaving the center marks in them if at all possible, mostly for when I reverse it and turn the bottom off. I do use a completely turned off bottom on this. It makes it a little bit easier for recentering. So mount it on my center. Advance this. Speed down to start. So this is going to be the bottom. These 3 points here will be turned away. These 3 points here are going to be the top of the bowl. Make sure that spins freely. This is a very irregular shape, and you do not want to have the tool rest in the way. One reason you don't move the tool rest while the lathe is spinning is because the tool rest makes a very lousy scraper. So start nibbling away. I need to make sure they have enough surface here so I can get a good tenon on it. I have to come down farther yet. That's pretty close. I want to take it down just a little bit farther. That should give me a good tenon, make my square shoulders here. Now I have to get rid of that stub there, so I'll turn down as much as I can before I break the rest or cut the rest off. Okay, I want something a little bit more pointy for cutting down in here. This won't break off well because the cube is on a bias, and so the grain is kind of on a bias, and I don't want to cut it down to the point to where it falls off because this is not secured in a chuck. So make it a little bit more pointy, and then I will use a saw. But that's good enough for this, and then I will use one of those center finder things for marking the center of that for reversing. Now, ideally with the tenon too, you want your jaws recessed far enough away so that if this is going to be your finished bottom, you can actually turn all the way to the bottom without turning into the jaws of your chuck. So this one's pretty good for that, and then we'll proceed to turn these away all the way up till we hit these 3 corners right here. So again, turning kind of from the base up towards the tips here. When we get to these tips, I really kind of want to start working backwards. You can see where this already chipped off a little bit. You are kind of going against the grain when you're going from this way in, but it just gives you less tear out on that. See, we look like we're getting closer to the very tips. This one's a little bit off center, so I have to come up a little bit higher. So down to the, not quite to the corner there, almost to it there. I'll try a different tool on this. Well, that cleans it up remarkably. So, still got to come in farther. Still a hair more. So down to the corner, pretty much on all rims. A little bit of tear out there, so I'm gonna make one last like finish cut right by the rim, and that'll be it and finish my outside shape, and then we'll turn the inside. So a little bit of tear out here, and that's because the grain's running 45 degrees. It comes up in just a very gentle curve up towards the top. Now it'll be time to turn out the inside. I may take a little bit more off the bottom there, give that a little more pleasing shape. Okay, the outside has been turned down to the shape I want and as clean as I can get it. Now time to do the inside. This is more normal bowl turning procedure. Start at the top, nibble down until I get around the edge here, and then I want to keep this edge consistent thickness through there. Take the tailstock off now. I don't know if you've been able to tell as the video is running or not, but this cut's really rough down in here. And again, that's because of the bias. The grain is running at an angle, so it's going to cut kind of bumpy through there. That's just the nature of this particular beast. So we can see here I've got good thickness through here, then it starts getting wide. So right about where this line starts right here is where I have to start again to get that down to consistent wall thickness. So still just a hair thick in the center. That looks pretty good. Let's continue turning down through the inside. Check my wall thickness. I think I am going to come back up to here and switch tools so I can get a little cleaner cut down the side. I am going to switch tool rest because I want one that fits inside a little better. Make sure that spins without contacting. Now this is a bottom of the bowl gouge. So I have a very blunt angle on the front, about 75 degrees, and is fairly straight up and down there. It's a great one for going through the transition and across the bottom. I'll see if I can make one more pass. I've got more tear out there than I like, but sometimes, as I said, with this style, it's almost impossible to get that all out just because the grain runs on the bias. Yeah. Eek. That may be about all I can do with that one, but that's the general idea for turning these. Something fun, something different to do. They do take a little bit more sanding because you can't get all of the tear out, but just another interesting little design to do. Okay, for reverse chucking, which basically means you turn the bowl around backwards so you can make the bottom all flat and smooth and pretty. Not necessary on all bowl turnings, but I do it on this one in particular just because there's no way to make the bottom clean, and I can't use a recess in there because of the grain orientation. It could split it because the grain is running at an angle rather than across. So on your headstock, you need something somewhat soft and rounded over. Some sort of a padding. This is an old sock. When they start getting thin, they're good for this or for shop rags. But something soft so it doesn't mar the wood. This is for a finished product. If it's still rough turn, it doesn't make that much difference. If you look on here, I've got a crosshairs. That's from one of those center finding jigs on here. Ease the tailstock into it right on the crosshairs. Press it in gently. You don't want to press it in really hard because you can actually make these split or you can dent the inside. Lay speed down, very slow, turn it up. See how close to true it is spinning. If this is a bowl that you're doing the twice turning where you've roughed it thick, dried it, and then going to return it, this is where you would true up your tenon for reverse mounting, but this reverse chucking, that's about the simplest way to do it.